just provide a quick update on where we are with our next light rail project, Portland-Milwaukie. This project, as you might recall, received preliminary engineering approval from the Federal Transit Administration on March 30th. So that was really the starting gun going on for a great deal of engineering efforts, public meetings, and other kinds of activities, including fundraising, that are underway right now related to moving this project forward into the next FTA milestone. We're also pleased to note that the FTA actually rated this project medium high. And while you might ask, why is it medium and not high? That's as high as any rail project rated ever across the country. So we believe that it was really on the top of the list for FTA in terms of worthy light rail investments. So we're very pleased to see that. We're moving ahead with a lot of activities. We've started our preliminary engineering contracts. We're working on a whole list of issues, including station locations, station designs, traffic analysis, the engineering design, preliminary structure designs, trackway designs. All of that work designed, if you will, to bring the project up to a level of 30% engineering. And our goal is to really have that completed at 30% level by about next month, March. We're also involved with, of course, a whole large number of third parties, property owners, neighborhood associations, businesses, all along the alignment, and we're working very hard with all of those parties to make sure that we have the smartest design we possibly can. Just to remind you, the alignment overall is 7.3 miles long from Portland State University to Oak Grove, the intersection of Park Place and McLaughlin. It would have about 2,000 park and ride spaces, about 1,000 at the terminus at Park Avenue, and another 1,000 at Tacoma. It's projected to carry in 2030 about 27,400 riders on a daily basis, so another very productive line, I think, for TriMet. Economically, there's 100,000 new jobs in this corridor projected by 2030, and the construction itself is expected to provide about 12,300 job years over its term. So it's a very big effort. In terms of key milestones, we expect to have over the next year, as well as the engineering effort, the completion of the NEPA requirements, the final environmental impact statement reflected in the record of decision, and that would be completed about a year from today with the actual FEIS published in March, or about March or April of next year. We then would be in position to apply for what FTA calls final design. That is an approval that we think is basically money in the bank, and basically signals the federal government's intent and programs, if you will, their financial support of the project overall. And then that then gets formalized into something they call a full funding grant agreement, which is expected in 2012. If all things go well and we are able to achieve that schedule, we would be looking to do certain early construction activities in actually summer 2011, with most of the construction actually starting in 2012 through 2015, and we would hope to see at the end of 2015 the opening of the line. So we're working very hard on this. We've had a number of public meetings. We've actually had 60 public meetings since the 1st of January. We've had 3 project open houses, and actually one tomorrow, which will actually be at the David Evans building in the River Place area. We have a project citizens advisory committee that meets every month. And they're very active and very engaged, and they met earlier this week. We also have a number of smaller stakeholder groups that we're meeting with, for example, the Brooklyn neighborhood about the station locations in Brooklyn, or particular issues like horn noise in Southeast Portland. And we're working very closely with a sort of a smaller group of stakeholders on some of those issues. One of the, of course, landmark features of the project is the new bridge. We had about a week and a half ago a meeting of our Willamette River Bridge Advisory Committee. You might recall the group that was chaired by former Mayor Bear Katz and has a number of other, I think, very qualified members to judge these sorts of things, and have come to some tentative conclusions. And I want to ask Ralph Bernard, who's our project manager for the Milwaukie project, to share those very briefly with you.
Thank you. 3 quick things: bridge type, vertical clearance, and path width. So as Neil mentioned, the bridge is between the Ross Island and the Markham, connecting the future South Waterfront campus over to OMSI and the Opera. Worked with for about a year. The top one here is a cable stayed and suspension bridge, kind of blended together, two structure types. We call it a hybrid. The one down below is more of a traditional cable stay. Did a long process, did a lot of engineering, a lot of cost analysis. At the end of the...
Could I ask you a question really quick? Actually, expand a little bit. I know I'm looking, spend a little bit of time looking at this.
Okay.
And other than just looking at the piers going out on the cable stay, what's basically the difference between the hybrid and the cable stay? I mean,
There's actually very minor differences. The tower heights are the same. The vertical clearance for navigation is the same. Essentially, the footprint on the land is the same. Where they differ slightly is the cable stays a little better on environmental. The piers are a little bit more in deeper water, which is good because rearing fish like shallow water moves a little farther away from some hazardous material, moves a little farther away from the Portland Spirits dock, a little farther away from a 36-inch high-pressure water main. So the cable stage is a little better in that regard, but other than that, they're pretty much identical in terms of how they perform on the critical elements.
And that includes maintenance and...
Yes.
But George, were you asking relative to design features as well?
Well, I mean, and when I looked at them, I said virtually the only difference I see is it appears as though the piers go out, on the
There is a slight, the suspension has kind of a catenary cable that drapes down, so there is a catenary cable on this one,
Oh, okay, I
there's
see
not one on
it.
this one. So there is a...
right in where it meets.
Right, there is a minor architectural difference. In terms of performance for light rails, streetcar, buses, bikes, pedestrians, they're the same. In terms of essentially user experience, as you walk across the bridge, where the cables are, how the railings are, those are the same. Did that get your question?
Sure.
Thank you. So we did a lot of work on costing, hired the National Constructors Group, which is a group of retired, essentially bridge contractors, and they build dams. A lot of the infrastructure across the United States in the last 40 years, they retired, formed a group. They do this around the country for agencies like ourselves, do independent cost estimates as if they were a contractor. So we kind of gave them this more round-up contractor style estimate. So the hybrid, it's about $139 million. It was about 3% over budget, where the cable stay was about $110 million, which was about 18% over budget. Went to the RBAC last month, and essentially, at the end of the day, the cable stay refund carried the day. It didn't get unanimous support, because there was still some desire for that catenary cable, but the majority went for the cable stay, since the differences were pretty minor, and both were pretty handsome bridges.
Rob, maybe as a further follow-up to George's question, why don't you just point out, if you can, on the bridge, the difference on that catenary and the slope of it? Because I think that's the piece that was of interest to some of the design people on the RBAC, on the advisory committee.
So the initial hybrid had more of a catenary cable that was more true form, what you might see on the Golden Gate. Okay, but that required a cable that had to be spun in place, in a very large cable, and very expensive. And kind of the charge from the RBAC was to make that bridge type viable, get it in the hunt for cost. To do that, we needed to reduce the size of the cable, so you could use standard cable stay technology, one that you could get off the shelf as opposed to fabricating in place. Also, one that wouldn't require any temporary shoring underneath. You build a temporary bridge to build a bridge, then remove the temporary bridge. Get rid of those type of cost. Doing that, kind of refining that structure, made this element straight, and then there's a curve, and then straight. So the old one was more curved the whole way, but that would have been kind of way beyond the project's budget. So the charge was, get it in the hunt, make it feasible. So the team got pretty close at 3% over budget. And so the RBAC numbers was, well, you kind of, reduce that aesthetic quality. Maybe, makes it in the hunt, but it's not what we really signed up for. If we really want that parabolic shape, we can't really afford that. So it's like, well, if you only can get halfway there, maybe it's better not to go there.